During apartheid, South Africa began to suffer under isolationism in sport from other countries due to their old-fashioned policies. The pressure that the outside and inside world put on the South African government to change policies so that South Africans could once again be included in international competitions led to changes. These changes can best be seen when comparing two soccer matches during apartheid. The first, in 1969, between the non-white team the Orlando Pirates and a white team Highlands Park, which was cancelled due to its defiance of apartheid policy at the time. The second game was in 1974 between the black-only team and a white-only team that was allowed to occur. To see why the second match was accepted while the first was not just 5 years prior, it is best to look at what was going on in 1969 and in between the games. By the 1950s, no other regime followed South Africa's segregated ideology in sports. South Africa had not been allowed to compete in the Olympic Games since Rome in 1960, or the World Cup and African Cup of Nations since 1961. The White Football Association of South Africa was suspended from FIFA in 1961 as well. The South African government was not backing down on the apartheid policy in sport. In fact, in 1965, the Proclamation R26, issued under the Group Areas Act, amended the previous law that enforced segregation in public cinemas to now include any place of public entertainment. This included sporting events, meaning blacks, coloreds, and Indians now needed a permit to attend a sporting event in a white area. South African politician Johannes de Klerk stated, "We will not allow anybody inside or outside South Africa to dictate to us what we should do in this country." There was manipulation involved as well. In 1969, at the Transvaal National Party Congress, Prime Minister B.J. Vorster requested a mandate for reform to ease international pressure. They now accepted mixed-race teams from abroad, but would continue to keep the South African teams segregated. Vorster did this to appeal politically to trading nations while all the while increasing the apartheid regime inside South Africa. In 1969, Dave Murray came up with the idea of holding a match between the white champions Highlands Park and the non-white champions the Orlando Pirates. The purpose of this game was to determine the true South African champion.
You had the white soccer association or white professional league and the non-white. And there was always this debate, who was better? It finally came to a head in 1969, where now we had a team amongst the non-whites who actually clearly stood head and shoulders above everybody else.
It filled the airways because people were now interested just to see what was going on because the White League was very popular. And just imagine if the black players had been quite good or even better, how much competition there would have been between blacks and whites, because football's international, it doesn't matter what colour you are.
The match was to be held on August 31st in Swaziland because it was illegal to host such a match in South Africa. The match received FIFA's approval.
We had exhausted all the oppositions this side of the color line. So Highlands Park apparently were the best on the other side of the color line.
However, 2 weeks before the travels to Swaziland commenced, it was announced that the match would not take place because it went against apartheid policy.
I heard that the game had been cancelled. It was disappointing, to say the least. We were looking forward to going on with football here, and it would have been good to have played an African side.
The evidence that I found is that it was actually the Minister of Police, S.O. Muller, who canceled the match just a few days before it was due to take place.
In 1970, South Africa was expelled from the Olympic movement. 1970 was the year when the nightmare of white South African sportsmen came true, for quite suddenly they found themselves widely ostracized and under attack from all directions. The Minister of Sport reported that South Africa was banned from 9 international sporting events during 1970 and the first 3 months of 1971. South Africa was suffering more and more exclusion in international sport. In response, Vorster set out a policy for multinationalism on April 22, 1971. Multinationalism allowed integrated national teams to play abroad and permitted the occasional match in South Africa between nations. The differing nations were blacks, coloreds, Indians, and whites. This policy was an attempt to gain readmission into world sport and to project an image of reform to the rest of the world while keeping apartheid intact. The state believed that multinationalism was an important step to decrease tension in large sections of the population. However, non-racial sports leaders rejected multinationalism. In a letter to the International Olympics Committee in 1972, they claimed multinationalism was an attempt to deceive the world about integrated sport. One way in which the South African government displayed this reform in policy was through the South African Games in 1973. This was the first time in South Africa that whites and blacks played against each other.
More than 40,000 spectators watch as the game swings into action on a rain-soaked field. A pattern of play soon emerges.
They generated a lot of excitement because the stadium was packed. We wanted to see how our boys would fare against the white team. You know, that was also a curiosity, if you like. You are curious to see how we will act.
Attacks mounted by the blacks run out of steam, and the superior discipline of the white team enables them to take a positive grip on the game.
I was one of those players who were selected to represent the blacks. But we had a big problem. We overtrained. Number two, we had what we call the inferiority complex. That hit us very, very badly. You know, we still had that respect for the other races, you know. When we went into that competition, we never performed.
Fancy footwork and fine ball control as the blacks go on to the attack, but the follow-through just isn't there. Wing Errol Berg seems to worry the blacks the most, and his tricky running has their defense in tatters.
In the end, the black team lost to the white team 4-0. The match occurred again between an all-black team and an all-white team on April 20th, 1974 in Ron Stadium in Johannesburg. In the 43rd minute of the game, a black player, McDonald Rees-Skosana, scored the game's opening goal. However, the ref did not count the goal due to a controversial offsides violation. Black supporters became outraged and began to throw things such as stones and bottles in protest. The referee had to blow the halftime whistle early, and the teams ran into the dressing rooms. They later came out to finish the game, and the black team lost 0-2.
That's one game I would say we were robbed because McDonald Rees-Skosana, if my mind serves me well, scored a goal from the center line. It was a pass from the center line. He just gone through the 45 yards. Then he took a shot from there. But he was ruled offside. You know, we couldn't believe an offside that far.
The ball was played forward, he's in an offside position. But the crowd saw it differently. But something had to happen. And sure, they started running on. Of course, the grounds were cleared, back into the dressing room. After 20 minutes, we came back to finish off the game.
Jomo Sono is famously quoted as saying that this is how South Africa is. We will never win.
To the non-white witnesses, the controversial offsides call represented the oppression that they experienced throughout their lives under apartheid. It can be seen by comparing these two games that, although some progress and reform was made in South Africa in the early 1970s, most of the policy changes were just for show and an attempt to ease international pressure while maintaining apartheid. South Africa had a long way to go from that 1974 game until true equality and reform was brought about by the end of apartheid 20 years later.